Here we are now, I think. Yeah. Purely for myself, so I don't need to write notes.
Yeah.
And second, maybe I want to use some parts for content on my website, but I would not publish anything without your consent. So I would first show you and get your approval, and then.
Perfect.
Cool. Did you had a chance to look at my email and my
I
website?
yes, I didn't have time to look at your website. Actually, I did when Neil told me about the interview the first time. Yes, I like what you're doing. I like the concept, which is approaching it at a very different angle. And it's a good angle. It's nice to know. I mean, I think that there's a good segment of people that do believe, especially the younger generation coming up now, that do believe that this is something that should be kept at the forefront of your mind when you're considering a supplier. I mean, I like everyone in my position. You know, you read the statistics, you read the uh, the studies that people are bringing out and saying that people are showing a lot more importance to this. I mean, in practice so far, maybe because I come from an isolated little island, you know, I'm not seeing it in other than on paper. I don't see it being done in practice all the time. But I mean, at the end of the day, you start realizing at some point it's all around you, and you say, "Oh, nah, this is how everyone's thinking now."
Mm-hmm. So one moment, because this is the worst time that my cat, of course, wants to leave the room. So let me just quickly get out of here.
As long as you publish it, you have to publish all of this, everything.
All of it. Yeah, yeah. So no, this is very exciting for me because you're the first I'm recording. You're the first within your position at the head of an operator that I'm talking to, and I'm very eager to hear your opinion and see where you think the industry as a whole, where you personally stand as an industry, and NL Europe, of course.
Yeah,
So,
well, maybe I'm a bit lucky because I am in this position, but I'm also not in this position for any public company. It's a private company. The owners are, as you read previously, you know, one is Dutch and the other one lived all his life in Holland. So their views align a lot with my own. I don't have to hide what I think. I can be direct. I can be, I mean, not I can be fully transparent without having to worry about the repercussions like maybe some of my peers would, and that allows me a lot of freedom.
it has advantages and disadvantages being public compared to or being private compared to public. But yes, the public immediately have to consider their shareholders and whatever they say. On the other hand, they have a clearer agenda because they have the obligation for annual reporting, which ESG reporting is now becoming a standard in Europe. So for me, as well, journalist, researcher, it's easier to get information because I have the annual report to base my first data on.
Yeah.
So therefore, I was also very happy again to have the opportunity to talk to you and see what's going on in the kitchen of L&L. But let's start with the first question that I also wrote in the email. What does sustainability mean to you? I've read in the interview you had with Casino News that you have two daughters.
I do. Yes.
What age are they?
They're 2 and 3.
All right, so they're not busy with this topic at all yet. So.
No, well, I'm very sure that at the rate that they're developing, that they're going to be bringing these things up before you know it. But basically, I've always been approaching it very much from a financial point of view. So what sustainability has always meant for me has always been the concept that you're always seeing the bigger picture. You are seeing the actions of today are contributing little steps to ensuring that, 100 steps ahead, you're going to be achieving your aims and you're still there, still going at it. You're not seeing what's good for today or this week. But my nature has always been a bit like that. I've always been very risk averse. I've always been money conscious. I've always saved for a rainy day. I was, raised with those principles. You should always have something, even when, there was a time when I could clearly cover my expenses or the rainy day if it had to happen for a month or two. And it's still the same philosophy, still the same mentality. And I've always tried to apply that a lot to my professional life as well. So everything we've ever touched is always with that concept in mind. So for me, it's quite a big word, to be honest. Sustainability. I mean, I think you can ask a lot of my colleagues. I find myself using it a lot.
All right. And a lot of people, when I ask them about their personal concept of sustainability, and it's often related to environment, they immediately start like, okay, recycling, maybe an electric car,
Climate change.
less flying, or those kind of things. Are those things that you consider in your private life?
In my private life, I have to admit, it's not something, well, so our day-to-day life is fashioned a lot by regulation. So as you know, by profession and by background, I'm a lawyer. So I might see regulation and legislation in a particularly positive light, because I can see the benefits of it, not just the obstacles or negatives. And one of the main positive aspects of legislation is it dictates how people live their lives. And that means that when, for example, as is the case in Malta, what is happening right now, there is a strong emphasis being put on waste separation, recycling, and enforcement for not doing that, together with fines. You don't see it as a negative aspect. You're saying, okay, this is good. It will take some. There will be some teething problems. All the generations will have a bit of adaptation, but then the younger generation, this is all they're going to know, like what has happened with us. So then you know that the same thing. You know, in the long term, it's going to have very positive effect. It is going to help the sustainability of the planet on ensuring that we use our resources to the best of our abilities. And I therefore I can't tell you I don't apply it in my life, because I live in a country which is already taking very active steps towards this. And if I didn't live it out, you know, I would be always on the wrong side of the law.
Yeah, there are consequences, but that's also when later on considering sustainability. I had a conversation the other day, and it's the point there was made, like, sustainability starts where compliance stops, and exactly, there's regulations. It demands us that by law that we have to take certain steps, and they are minimum. But as a lawyer, you know that it's very difficult to get those laws in place in the first place. But sustainability often goes much beyond that, of more than what we can demand of the people, and it also requires a certain mindset, which I think that the times are there that more and more people are aware of this, that that we need to make different choices, not only because the law demands it of us, but also for the longevity of our species and of society.
Yes, but so basically, I guess the best way to look at it is that the law can provide you with a framework and can give you even basic minimum principles. But then it's on you to adapt best to what is good for you and your needs and the needs of your community. It's pointless doing something just to say you do it. You need to do it with a purpose in mind. So it's too abstract and too vague without getting, unless you get into the granular. For me, I'm always going to be looking at it because of since I dedicate so much time to it, the good of the future of my family and the good of the future of my business. So I'm always going to be thinking of it in that way when it comes to sustainability. I don't. I think it's dangerous to just say point blank and just say like, oh yes, you have to go beyond what is needed, because maybe your opinion of what is needed is very drastically different to what my opinion of what is needed, and we might not be doing what's best for the common good. Whereas maybe a unified regulator can have that visibility to be able to guide us all.
Yeah. All right. So with regards to the challenges that the world faces and society faces when it comes to sustainability, and that's not only environment but also social, is regulation always the best way then, I guess, in
I
your
do.
opinion?
You
Or
see, again, I do feel so. Maybe again, I'm biased because I form part of L&L. What is our strategy? Our strategy is regulated markets. What does that impact? If you just look at it from the social perspective, I would say, on average, most regulated operators would give more importance to the social aspect and the responsible gaming aspects and the consumer protection aspects as opposed to someone who is an unregulated operator. So did every single company set out with the same frame of mind? This is what I want to do for the customer? Maybe not, but because the regulation set out those minimum principles, then even incidentally, they are satisfying those goals. They are providing standards for responsible gaming. They are bettering society. They are helping the person. Whereas someone who doesn't have to follow these regulations, you might find someone who has it, but I find that you're more likely not to, because that is one of the main incentives of being an unregulated operator.
exactly. It's hard to. The thing is, we live in the common standard now of doing business is that you have to compete, and if you, on one hand, we're what I also believe at BetterWorldCasinos is that by dealing with these matters, it's good for marketing, it's good for image, because more and more consumers demand that the companies are not only purpose driven but also partly impact driven and have a clear stance on what is their contribution to society. Whereas, exactly as you point out, brands that work in unregulated markets, they have a different agenda, or they're more mainly direct on the profit focus. And this is also something that I've been thinking a lot about. The purpose of a casino company is obviously to entertain. And also to earn money, of course, for its stakeholders, for its employees, and everybody wants to have a nice life. But that's a careful balance, isn't it? To decide when is money enough, and as a head, as a company, you have these considerations, and it's like, okay, when it comes to compensation and these things, like how much do we want to keep inside? How much do we invest back in the company? How much do we invest back into society? And this is where we already start with, and we segue into the ESG question, like what does ESG mean and sustainability for L&L, and what is their strategy there?
So it goes. I'm going to throw it back at sustainability. So and the conversation that we had before, I believe very strongly you should always keep in mind that there will never be enough money. So you can never have enough money. If that is the goal, then you're gonna fail. It's a fool's task. 2 is bigger than 1, 3 is bigger than 2, 4 is bigger. So as soon as you hit it, you're always going to be looking at it and saying, it's not enough, it's not enough, it's not enough. So that on its own can never be a determining factor of what you're doing. So you should focus on the other principles around it. Now, in your question, you touched upon a lot of factors in one. Obviously, ESG, your standard definition. You have your environment, your social, and your governance. Me, in my position, I tend to look at the governance first, and then the other two come with it. From being an online casino company, you said it yourself. We are an operator. We do casino and sportsbook, and we are a company. You cannot forget the company part. It's misleading people if you do not say that this is for profit. Of course, it's for profit. The people who put in,
you need to take care of your employees,
Not only the employees, but also the founders, the investors, the people who set up and injected a lot of capital in order to make to make the company a possibility, a reality, to give so many people a livelihood, an employment, and also a potential service that they can get enjoyment from. So the company aspect, you cannot forget it, even though that obviously people take it for granted nowadays because they're focusing a lot on the other aspects, sometimes the negative repercussions and everything. But it's a company first and foremost. we also happen to be a casino company, an online casino company. And because of that, I feel that we have quite a detrimental impact on environment. It's because of the nature of we are, we have a lot of internet pollution. We use data centers. We're tech heavy. The whole world is going tech heavy, but because of the nature of our business, you see what can you do to be lean, to be sustainable, both in terms of cost, but also in terms of waste. You don't want waste in any sense. We're lucky that the data center we use has already publicly had said that they are looking into using renewable energies. We use that. We're in a country which has maybe for their own reasons. I'll get to that soon. Wants to put more emphasis on climate change measures, renewable energies, trying to mitigate the impact of carbon emissions and trying to mitigate the impact on the environment. However, because of our nature, I feel that there's only so much that can be done to mitigate the impact on environment. Going back to something you said before about how people can use ESG to show that they are impact driven instead of profit driven, and to show that they are purpose driven. I do hate that part of it. I hate that people are showing it so much. I hate that they're like, this is me. Look at what I've done. Look at us. This is what we've done now.
Prone to greenwashing. Yes.
It seems a bit more like this is more of instead of dictated by our CSR team, more are dictated by our marketing and media team. And I again, my nature, maybe I'm a bit of a skeptic. I don't like that aspect of it. If maybe it becomes our disadvantage because as L&L, even though we do stuff, we don't advertise it enough, or we don't advertise it at all. So people will naturally assume we do nothing. However, I feel that, maybe I feel wrongly, but I feel that when you're advertising it and trying to take advantage of it from a marketing perspective, are you doing it for the right reasons in the first place? So there is that balance as well. So from a social perspective, you keep these things in mind, what you're contributing as a company to society, both in terms of your clients, both in terms of your employees, both in terms of your and in terms of your peers. The regulation does enough, in the sense of it definitely steers us in the right direction. I feel that in the 6 years I've been here, seeing day one to now, the changes we have had to implement because of regulation and because of the stories and the case studies that have been in the industry that have been happening. Maybe it was easier for me coming in from non-gaming to gaming, and I could see it with fresh eyes, and I could say, like, this is the way we have to go. This is what's right. I didn't need a law to come and tell me this is what's right. Some of the things we had already inserted eventually came into law later. Some of the things we apply now are still coming into law in the UK. So we give a strong emphasis on affordability. We give a strong emphasis on interactions, on markers of harm, and but most importantly, I think the main principle and the value we live by is you keep it simple and you just show you care and you be kind. You treat the player and you treat everyone else like how you want to be treated. These are basic principles I was raised with. You try to instill it all the time with everyone. Every time every person you meet, every conversation you have, and you end up sounding like a broken record. But eventually, hopefully, it becomes a bit inherent. Like, I'm sure there are a lot of conversations that you had with your own parents growing up that like now that you find yourself every now and again you might have a conversation with someone, you say, oh, I sound just like one of them, in your head. So from the social perspective, as a company, we do stuff. I'm not the biggest fan of marketing it, advertising it. I do feel that as in terms of our own approach towards it, I do a lot of it personally. I dedicate a lot of my time. I like to give back, both in terms of teaching, mentoring, presentations, these kind of things. I do feel that I think that's a good contribution to society when we're all trying to help each other. From the governance aspect, again, this is my number one. That's the reason why I'm in this position. For me, the financial stability of a company is going to lead back to all that sustainability we talked about. My job here is not to make a quick buck in 3 months, 6 months, and quick turnaround. It's not this type of enterprise, not type of entity. The concept and principle we've had is treat the players right, keep improving day by day the business and the procedures we have, keep the people happy, both internally and externally, and eventually the money comes. It comes as you go along. I mean, like, but that's not the goal. The money is the tool that will keep it going. We enjoy coming into work. We enjoy, our daily lives. We're office first. We like speaking to each other. We like seeing each other. You're as friendly as co-workers can get. So long may this continue. We enjoy our lives. For me, that's the key term to sustainability. It's making sure you preserve it for as long as possible.
I think it's very, very well explained, and it all comes down, I think, with ESG. It maybe should be GES, because I think governance comes first, as it determines the value and ethics within the company that flows into your E and your S behavior.
I agree.
I think the governance is the umbrella on which environment and social sit. So to come back on what you said earlier, yes, there are companies that are a bit too forward with it, and it seems more like marketing. I think that's also for all companies a very delicate balance to where do you like difference between public and private companies is the transparency aspect. A public company needs to be more transparent because that's what's demanded, but
or less transparent, because maybe they would be in foul of some regulation or law. Because if I was in that position and me saying the wrong thing could bring the company or myself into disrepute or penalty, then it will also fashion what I say and how I say it.
Yeah. What do you think about the following statement? I was discussing it the other day with someone. Business up to now, we look in the past, it has been opaque, the opposite of transparent, because that was what has been accepted, and this is how business was done. There was no need for transparency. But now with changing times, customers and society demands more transparency. Oh, now I lost my train of thought.
Would it be about reporting the principles or transparency in the terms of, I don't know what you were going to say, maybe pay or gender or diversity?
Now more and more it's being demanded to be transparent. So how transparent do you want to be in order, like the point you made, not to be too obvious marketing and greenwashing, like look at us?
Yes.
That's one of the things that I often get annoyed by when I went to look at operators. They are very proud that they're compliant, and then I think like, but if you're not compliant, you don't have a license. You're out of business. So why is there to boost or be so proud about being compliant?
Or just as bad is about promoting all the awards you won in certain compliance and responsible gaming, and then being found in breach of those same conditions and regulations which you're promoting.
But at least there's kind of humility in it as well.
So that's the thing that gets to me. I feel that the transparency is not being very transparent. It's actually being misleading.
I remember the point that I was trying to make. If you're now, so you could get away with not being transparent because it now wasn't demanded. Now it's becoming more and more normal that you are transparent. So if you're not working towards more transparency, it's because you have something to hide. Is that a right conclusion?
Yes. Now, my counterpoint to that is, should everything be completely public? Shouldn't some things be private? Again, I come from a world of regulation and legislation, and also I'm a lawyer, so I have spent a lot of my time being the recipient of confidential information.
Mm-hmm.
People trust in me, and therefore people tell me things which they wouldn't otherwise disclose. They have that freedom, knowing, at the back of their head that information is never going to be disclosed. But if you suddenly make everything transparent, I'll go straight to it. Like, for example, I am not a big fan of the way that the pay transparency directive is going to come in. I understand why it is coming in. I understand how some companies have caused an issue. But in truth, sometimes the statistics can give the wrong impression. And I understand that it's only applicable to very large companies, and or at least large companies in one of the three criteria. If you're over 250 employees, if you hit 40 million net turnover, 20 million in assets, and we're not that size of a company. But if someone had to just strictly look at how much do your females earn versus how much do your males earn, you're going to see a gap. But the gap is not one that has been intentionally created, or it's one because of lack of opportunity. It's very far from the case. I mean, I find myself having these discussions with people, telling them, like, don't shy away, go for it, apply for the opportunity, see if you get it. We're here, we're very straightforward. If someone can do the job, it doesn't matter where you come from, who you are, whatever. The most important thing is the job at hand and everything, and then you get paid for the job. We don't have a discrepancy other than experience and capability for the job.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, most of our senior positions are held by men historically. It's just how it is, and we have extremely low turnover. So we're not going to kick people out just to kick people out, just to satisfy a quota. That, you see, I have
positive discrimination is also discrimination.
My problem with that is that I hate I understand the reason why it needs to be imposed because of the discrimination which does occur, but I hate how it could impact companies like ours, where this is not a thing, where we're very open about it. We have these discussions internally. So I'm so ultra aware of it. You end up creating some kind of positive discrimination in the wrong way. So when I say it like that, I mean, I know from statistically that the most common applicant for a job role is a male Caucasian. That is the most common applicant, because he will not stop, look at everything and say, oh, I satisfy 99 out of 100, so I won't apply. However, other demographics, they will do that. They will look at a job application and they will rule themselves out before they even apply. It's very common. And that creates an imbalance in the application pool. And then obviously, if you find a company like ours and you're trying to just base it on skills and assessment and everything, then the best person wins, whoever that is. But if you're competing out of a pool of 9 men and 1 woman, the chances of her getting the job are 1 in 10. That's it.
It's very interesting that I've never considered that there are people that don't apply to a certain position because they think of the general people that get those positions, that they don't fit that picture, so they already don't apply because they think they won't get the job based on gender, ethnicity, or
yes. So this is a reality. This is a fact, and that is why the background and the context why people feel that quotas are necessary. Because with the use of quotas, when you see people who represent you in positions, senior positions, in positions which were historically you could never imagine yourself to be in that position coming from your background and everything. When you see that it's a reality and this is the norm, then it inspires you to also work towards that and get there, knowing that, the ceiling has been broken. I can get there as well. It's not just because of who I am, I cannot get there. But it's still unfair on companies like ours that, though, you don't need to do that with us. So why are you restricting? Why are you imposing on me a potential situation where someone who is not as good as someone else gets a role, and someone who is better fit, but unfortunately, because they don't fit in the right demographic now, they are being discriminated against. So again, it's a delicate balance with like all these things.
It's interesting. It makes me think, like, could you balance that or counteract it by putting in a job vacancy, for example, not that we specifically look for a female or a black person or somebody, but saying like we do encourage everybody to apply, even if you might think, how could you communicate that to circumvent it?
So the thing is, there are inherent biases. So it's because they're normal characteristics of the type of applicant. It's very difficult to do one communication that is going to cater and target and address each and every one of those biases that will reassure that person that they can apply. It's not, I mean, you can definitely get it wrong, but you can't, like if you say something like, pregnant women don't apply, like obviously you got it very wrong. But if there's no such thing, in my opinion, and I hope to be, someone can enlighten me and say like, yo, we found massive success with this. There's no such thing as a one size fits all. So what you try to do is then you create the positive discrimination. You say, at an early stage, you try to reassure people like, listen, this is the situation, this is how we are, these are the values. Like I said, it doesn't matter who you are. The most important thing is we see that you get the job done, your character is a fit for the company, and these principles, which are faceless, it's they're the value, they're the results oriented. But that's why then thankfully, these laws originate and start with the biggest companies, because obviously, since you have a bigger pool, then the bias is increased, the discrimination increases, and that's why it should be targeted at them. However, the plan is to expand it to all companies eventually, and that's becomes a bit more difficult.
I think it's one of those examples where there's no way to be perfect, but you should strive to be on the path to doing it in a certain way. But along the way, we have to figure out how this works and how we can do this the best way.
Yep.
Until the moment that we realize that we're sort of there and that everybody's getting the same opportunity.
Awareness is key. Being aware of these facts, be the one that I'm discussing with you, being the father of 2 daughters, I am going to be in a good position to be able to communicate to this already to them. If they come and tell me, oh, there's that job, but I'm never going to get it, so I'm not even going to, I'd be the first one to say, you know what, let them take that decision. Go.
Do you have the knowledge, skills? Do you have the experience that they require? Then anything else should not be relevant.
Yeah.
Cool. So this was very nice to go into detail about this case of gender equality, because this is one of the topics that's within ESG always very high on the list. I think when we talk about ESG within the iGaming industry, it's first of all, like we said, compliance. Well, we have mentioned that before. It shouldn't be an issue. Compliance is there. If you're not compliant, you're out of business. Then the second one is, of course, responsible gambling, which is the most important, I think, within the industry, rightfully so, because we want to reduce that harm as much as possible, and people to enjoy gambling for what it is, a form of entertainment. Then gender equality is the third, I think, that I always most often encounter in the list. So what would be the next most important topic for iGaming when it comes to ESG?
I wouldn't say it would be relevant just for iGaming, but it's any company. It's diversity.
Oh, of course. We focus here on iGaming.
It is diversity, and I mean, like, okay, gender is one thing, but diversity means a lot of things. I mean, even
of course. Diversity is what I should have said. Yes.
But I mean, okay, let's say we're including it in the previous conversation because the same principles apply. It does require a lot of knowledge. If you are in a senior position, and you are leading a team that is made up of different, individuals coming from different nationalities, different backgrounds, different situations, I do believe it does require a lot of attainment of knowledge on that person's part to be able to be adequately equipped to cater for the leadership of that team. So the reason why I bring this up as a challenge for the iGaming industry is because whether you like it or not, the bigger the companies are, the pool of people are going to come from different nationalities, different backgrounds. And even though we can, like I told you at the very beginning of this conversation, I can describe it as a company with Dutch flavor, it's Dutch backgrounds and beginnings. I mean, there's a Dutch community, there is a Maltese community, there is a Scandinavian community, and you need to be able to communicate properly with all and take into the needs of all. And then make sure that everyone can communicate in between intra-community. So the diversity, I'd say, is the biggest challenge, both from an operational perspective and a sustainability perspective.
Let me put you what's the word for this?
Off topic.
But no, not off topic. And a statement that I've made many times. I just want to put it in front of you, see what you think. A company could not make a profit unless it reduced its harm to society, or it's done everything it can to be net zero and to reduce its harm. And after then when you invested all your profits in revenue in that, then you can start making the benefits. And how do you think about that statement?
I think it's false. I think it's the same concept that you just mentioned before. If you say that you need to be perfect before you can then start to operate, you will fail before perfection. So what you need to do is strive for perfection. You need to have your procedures in place with that aim in mind, but always keeping in mind the obstacles along the way. I feel there are some bigger companies that have made that mistake, that they have, maybe for marketing and media reasons, maybe it's because of what you said before, they need to be purpose driven and impact driven and need to be seen to be that. But they made this their main mission at all costs, and then suddenly when they see that it's hurting them a lot more than they actually thought it would, rather than benefiting them from a profit perspective, they did a U-turn and abandoned that mission very quickly, or suddenly mitigated its importance. I don't like that. I feel like it's not very transparent to begin with. So I will tell you from day one, you mitigate the risk, but not mitigate it to zero, because it's impossible to mitigate it to zero, especially because of the nature of the industry itself. Some of the signs of harm and some of the signs of risk come retroactively. They come later, or with deep analysis. And you don't always get it right. So perfection is impossible. If I had a team here which was made up of only responsible gaming analysts and nothing else, the business would crumble. So you cannot only side towards one way, but it's a whole ecosystem. I think we have the balance right, because from a commercial perspective, we're doing well. From a responsibility perspective, we're doing great. We have taken a huge hit from the side of, we do not seek aggressive growth. We seek very sustainable long-term growth. I'd rather have 100,000 people spending £10 than one person spending £10,000. It's
yeah, sounds perfectly healthy to me. Good. One last question, I think, that I had in mind. When it comes to procurement, for example, you guys are in Bietikara, right?
No, we're in Mosta.
I'm Mosta, sorry. No,
yeah.
no, I don't know why I went to.
So you mean recruitment?
No, procurement. So when you come to, basic things where so earlier I said, like, when we talk about ESG, what comes to mind is always responsible gambling, diversity, compliance. But when it comes to sustainability, it's also the choices that you make. You mentioned earlier, like, okay, we have a server provider, our servers, and run partly on renewable energy. Is that at some point a factor for business decisions? For example, also other things when it comes to office furniture or very mundane, or your next company party. In these kind of business decisions, does ESG have any place there?
Yes, it does. I can't really pinpoint specifically to tell you these are the specific strategies. For example, we wouldn't uproot our data center for another data center if they are leaning more towards ESG at this time. Not just simply on that sole criterion, particularly if we see that our business partner is already taking steps towards there and has signaled that they're going to be there, because then it's just, again, it doesn't seem very business savvy. But I do have my frustrations from an ESG perspective as well. So one of the main things that I would say maybe it's coming from my lack of science or lack of knowledge of the system. But one thing which I've always wished for was the capability for everyone to invest in as much solar power, energy as possible. We're a sunny island.
Malta, yes.
Yes, we have a majority of the year is in sunlight. It's renewable energy. It seems like a no-brainer, especially if you can afford the upfront cost. Let me have as many panels as you want. But unfortunately, this is the negative impact of regulation, that maybe it could be that our infrastructure cannot support it, but there's a cap. There's a maximum amount you can actually invest in. That is something which I wish could change, because I do think that is something, that is which benefits everyone. It lowers your costs in the long run, as well as becoming more sustainable, less reliable on the grid.
That's also why I think that the iGaming or the casino industry and the gambling industry in general could play a very big role, because the funds and money is there. To really support this transition comes to procurement and the choices you make. So like you said, solar panels, okay, regulation might be unfavorable to really go all the way, but where other smaller companies might financially not be able, because often it still is the case that the more sustainable option is a bit more expensive. So I think that within the gambling industry, because the funds are there, if the money is being made, there is a lot more option to choose for these things, and this way we could push this transition, because the more this industry is being supported, the quicker the prices will drop due to increase in numbers.
But again, it goes back to a bit what I said. I don't like only thinking in that way of thinking, even though I'm completely.
I agree with you. It's not about being perfect, because
it's not like one of the things which we do quite often do. And now that I think about it, is, for example, we like to, when you organize a team event or something, we either do we either have it at a place which is related to an employee here, so whether it's a spouse or a partner or their own thing, or someone that might need a bit of a helping hand at this time. So we like to do it. We like to give them a bit of business, throw our business that way. Because wherever we go, we're, again, it's a gaming company. We don't really hold back, and it's you have a good time as well when you're having a good time. But that's, I feel like it has a lot of benefits. It has no profit implications whatsoever, at least no direct ones, other than keeping, I feel like, a good community happy. But I think that's one of the key things that the gaming industry has been very successful in. They're very very happy to spread the joy around, spread the wealth. It's a give back to the community.
Yes. Are you familiar with the difference between scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions?
No, I am not.
So when it comes to calculating your carbon footprint, scientifically, the scientific-based calculations, they distinguish between scope 1, 2, and 3. Now, 1 and 2 is always a bit tricky to distinguish, because 1 is what you actually use, and I have to see if I know it correctly. Then 2 is like your employees, your flights and your commutes and all those kind of things. But scope 3 is all your suppliers. And I think that especially there in scope 3, there is it's underestimated the amount of impact we could have as an industry on encouraging other businesses and supporting other businesses to trying to make the extra effort and in that way accelerate the transition.
I can only agree.
Would you, at some to come back to the point of transparency, there are many companies that help with making transparent your carbon footprint and see to measure it, because it all starts with awareness, to know what effect you have, and then you can see where you can reduce. That's something that you have done or would consider in the near future, and if so, would you make that public?
I mean, we can. I'm a bit also concerned about the negative repercussions of transparency. I don't want transparency to be created in order to vilify people. I don't want a situation where suddenly, we're pointing at ABC and saying, that entity and that company, oh, shame on them because they have this gender pay gap and they have this carbon emissions which they never looked at and everything, and using that kind of negative pressure to cause it.
I hope to, with my platform, Better World Casino, I hope to have the opposite effect. Not to point the finger and shame, but to and say thumbs up, like
look at how
this
good these
company,
guys are.
for example, L&L is making the extra effort. I'm working, for example, with our partner SG Certified on creating a casino or sustainability index for casino operators, and this is one of the things that we would rely on building this information, not only from the environmental but also the social effect. And it would be very interesting to get as many people, many companies on this bandwagon to say, like, look, this is what we do, and let's make a bit of a competition out of it and see who gets closer to the zero line.
And that's that's a very good idea in the sense of maybe they should, in order to avoid this, only make transparent the very best. And then if you want to be seen in this category, you're going to have to strive and you're going to have to, like, listen, we're not singling you out as such a bad player, but we're not singling you out as a good player either. So you're going to have to work hard to be in that category of these companies which are like, we're doing so well, you're doing great, you're everything, everyone should strive to be you. But I hate, there is an aspect of, it's human nature that sometimes people enjoy seeing other people getting destroyed.
And the trolls online and the haters gotta hate, and
yes, the shade of fraud. So
we have to ignore them.
So that's I'm a bit afraid of that side of the transparency directives and the transparency, because it's quite easy to suddenly pick your villains when we should be celebrating our the heroes.
Yeah. And that's also what Better World Casinos is a startup, and it's in some cases a sensitive topic. The industry in general, for many people, have still a taboo. And when you think like, when I talk to people that ask me, what do you do? They're like, well, I do ESG in gambling. And they just have a hard time mixing those two together. Like, what does it mean? But as I said earlier in the conversation, all industries need to transition to also gambling. So I hope that by having these kind of conversations and raising awareness and maybe also hopefully giving people a bit more to think, that we step by step go into this direction.
Perfect. I wish you the best.
Thanks, man. I love this conversation. Thank you so much for it. Very much appreciate it. And well, hope to speak to each other soon. I'll be in Malta in May, so
it'll be good to get a beer or meet up.
I'd love to come visit the office and
yes, of course. Great. Super.
Christopher, thank you so much. Have a great day, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Bye.